Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. In this video we will be looking at how McLaren's F1 Belgian-British hero Lando Norris single-handedly saved the entire 2025 United States Grand Prix weekend. To recall, the 2025 season opening Grand Prix weekend in Oscar Piastri's home race in Australia was sold out within minutes. We all know that was because he was considered to have an outside chance of winning the title driving the World Championship winning McLaren. Other GPs that were sold out included the Italian Grand Prix, which was sold out months in advance, and we all know why that was. We can also see that most of the notable travelling supporters from outside the home countries were Dutch and British, and again we know why that was. However, it does not appear that Americans are particularly motivated to traveling around the world to follow F1, nor are American expats inclined to support the sport when it arrives in their host countries. Perhaps the home-based Americans are not particularly keen to travel out, given how unpopular their country is at present, or it may be that they themselves are concerned about their chances of re-entry under the current circumstances. Nevertheless, if Mohammed, or is it Brad, is not willing to go to the mountain, then the mountain must go to Brad, and that is what John is banking on Lando to help him do. John's previous attempt to use Lando's busy mate to help bring the mountain to Brad did not work out as well as he had intended. After reaching down from Mount Colorado like the Greek god Zeus, to halt Sir Lewis's procession to an 8th record-breaking title behind the safety car, he moved pieces around with no concern for the rules to steal the title from the face of the sport in America to gift it to the young white Dick Dastardly that he felt would help attract the right-leaning motorsport enthusiast in the US. Because Americans are known to love a winner, John doubled down on his scandalous robbery by gifting his Dick 3 more goes. But to his chagrin, or was it schadenfreude, the US did not warm to his Dick. Wonder why? Perhaps he should have consulted ChatGPT before cutting off his nose to spite his racist face. Unsurprisingly, the USGP has been struggling to sell tickets in the years after the face of the sport in America was unjustly dethroned. However, after John's Dick stopped performing, the ticket sales started rising, so this could possibly explain why John is now looking for a new Dick. Despite growing interest from last year, we can see that going into this weekend, the USGP has not sold out, despite claims by some of Malone's minions that it has. Now I can't understand why they would be lying about selling out tickets, when they know it's not true, but then I can't understand Abu Dhabi 2021 either. So if you know what strategy they were pursuing by making false claims of selling out, please let us know in the comments. Well, some of you may recall that when John effectively bought F1, even though he only leased the TV rights, he claimed that he wanted closer racing to replace the Lewis-Hamilton Mercedes dominance, but then went on to manufacture a Verstappen Red Bull dominance. So, given how badly the manufactured Verstappen Red Bull dominance went down, one can see why he would revert to Plan B, which was to manufacture a closer title race. Enter his new hero, or is it Dick Dastardly, Lando Norris? But before going into how Lando was manufactured to save the USGP, if you are enjoying this video, we invite those of you who haven't yet done so, to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the notification icon, to be notified when the next one is uploaded. We'd also like to urge those of you who haven't yet done so, to sign our online petition for an inquiry into the BBC and Channel 4's coverage of Lewis Hamilton and Abu Dhabi, which we have amended to include Gary Lineker's sacking by the BBC. A link has been provided in the description. If you are on X, then please repost our tweet. Thank you. Back to how Lando Norris saved the USGP. Once John realized that while Americans loved dominant champions like Sir Lewis, they did not care much for a gassed-up arch-villain like Max, outside of WWE. So, he had to find another alternative pretty quickly, and the plans for Max's 5th consecutive title were cancelled. Even though Lando had also failed to deliver the close title race that they had wanted last season, they had no choice but to try him again this season. But this time around they hedged their bets by making it a three-way title race between the two McLaren drivers and Max. McLaren were inside the circle of Malone's trust because they had helped to gaslight the Abu Dhabi robbery and run defense for Max's other titles, for which they were amply rewarded with a championship-winning car. Unfortunately for the Masters of the Universe, Oscar spoiled their show by outperforming their dicks so badly that the concept of a close title race was fading away. So, McLaren were called upon to hold Oscar back at every opportunity, to keep the narrative alive. As you can see from the chart, Max and Lando started of the season vying for top place, just like the script required. Never mind that Australia was so badly affected by the weather, that it was a pure lottery that Lando happened to win, after Oscar had been ordered to hold position earlier in the race. But the young Aussie came back immediately in the following race, establishing a pattern that would eventually put some clear blue water between him and Malone's dicks. He overtook Max to claim second place in the tables in the fourth round in Bahrain. Critically, this was where Lando, the early season leader courtesy of winning the Australian lottery, started struggling with self-doubt as he wilted under the pressure of leading the table for the first time in his career. He qualified a lowly sixth amidst much public hand-wringing but was able to recover to finish the race in third. The self-doubt worsened in the next race in Saudi Arabia, along with his performance, as he qualified 10th and finished the race in fourth. Given that Max had publicly conceded the title race in Bahrain, you can appreciate how John felt as his new dick was flopping worse than his old one. With Oscar pulling away at the front, as he won 3 in a row from Bahrain to Miami, McLaren swung into action with a blend of slow pit stops and dodgy team strategies in the next 2 races that helped Lando close the gap. But Oscar pulled away again with victory in Spain, and in desperation the under-pressure Lando in Canada almost took both of them out, but ended up coming of the worst, as the Aussie was able to survive the contact and extend his lead over his teammate who did not finish the race because of the contact he caused. Lando made a fleeting recovery in Austria, but John's minions were desperate to stop Oscar from pulling away yet again, so at the British GP, where he was cruising to victory after easily overtaking pole-sitter Max early in the race. The FIA gave him a penalty for an infraction committed by Max, but what else is new? Critically, even though McLaren claimed the penalty was unjust, they declined Oscar's request for him and his teammate to switch positions, and thus allowed Lando to close the gap and benefit from the unjust penalty at his teammate's expense. Nothing surprising there. As expected, Oscar pulled away again in the following race in Belgium, thereby forcing McLaren to rein him back in the next race in Hungary, by implementing team orders. Now, despite acknowledging that poor pit-stop strategy had cost Oscar the lead, McLaren nevertheless chose not to use team orders to switch their drivers to rectify the injustice, thereby allowing Lando to again close the gap. By now the pattern was becoming so clear that when McLaren again deployed team orders to allow Lando to overtake Oscar and close the gap, the Tifosi went crazy and booed Lando on the podium. As you can imagine, with the USGP only 2 races away by then, McLaren and John were getting desperate to ensure that they came to the US with the gap tightening between Oscar and his chasers. Desperate situations call for desperate measures, so in the following race in Azerbaijan, Oscar's car developed problems as he ended up with his lowest qualifying position in 9th. For a driver who had never qualified lower than 4th all season, this was quite a drop. But to make matters worse, from his lowly position on the grid, not only did he false start, but he sadly did not finish the race. Now, we don't know about you, but as we had cancelled our Sky subscription after Abu Dhabi 2021, we could only watch the highlights on YouTube. It appeared to us that a light flashed across Oscar's dashboard, just before the start, which induced him into the false start. Perhaps you can let us know your opinion in the comments. For us, the combination of the poor qualifying car, followed by the induced false start and uncharacteristic DNF, just as John and his crew were desperate to close the gap coming into the USGP, was just too much of a coincidence. Nevertheless, Lando in his customary manner fluffed his lines as he could only finish 7th. In further desperation, John and his lamestream media minions had to resort to selling the outlandish notion that Max could somehow recover a 69-point deficit in the 7 remaining races to keep the notion of a close title race alive. This was of course a tacit acknowledgement that they could no longer rely on Lando, as they had done everything they possibly could to keep him in it. As you can imagine, a desperate Lando took the desperate step of barging his teammate out of the way in the following race in Singapore, and surprise surprise, neither the FIA nor McLaren saw fit to take any action. Somewhat reminiscent of John's old limp dick. Unsurprisingly, this did not go down well with the Aussie, the Australian media, and any self-respecting neutral like us. The resultant breakdown of team harmony overshadowed the global media coverage of McLaren retaining their world title. But the controversy as Lando closed the gap to his teammate worked well for John's need to sell a tight title race going into the USGP. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is the story of how Lando Norris single-handedly saved the USGP, albeit with a little help from the FIA and McLaren. Of course, with all that help, or is it cheating, Lando has now morphed into an F1 supervillain just like his Belgian-Dutch Bezzy mate. A Bezzy mate who has vowed to get revenge as his nose was somewhat put out of joint with whatever it was that he felt Lando had done to him in Singapore. So, not only does Lando have to cope with Max gunning for revenge, but he also has to deal with a teammate that always comes back and is no longer prepared to accept dodgy team orders. Now some of you may disagree, but we don't believe that Lando, the king of self-doubt, has the mettle to cope with such pressure. Forza Ferrari.